And welcome back to another episode of the Real Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jacob O'Connor. Real Conversations podcast for those dedicated to doing hard things and living a meaningful life. This week, on Thursday, actually, John and I took what we're calling our first annual company retreat, which is funny because it's just him and I. But we went to one of our mentors' ranch and just kind of got off the grid for about 24 hours and spent the night and then into most of the next day just strategizing. It's been about 18 months since John and I started our company, and then we built out the restaurant. We've been open for 5 months now at this point. And we thought it was important to take a moment for ourselves to reflect on how things are going and what direction are we heading. And so very thankful to our mentor who let us go out there, and he actually came out to facilitate the conversation with us. And it was just an incredibly valuable trip to get out of the restaurant and to really take a step back and think about, what are we building? What are we working on? What direction are we heading? How do we feel about this? And just check in on everything. And it was off the grid. There was not really any service. There was there's nothing out there except for fishing, and we built a fire, and then we just kind of sat there and strategized and thought through things. I think that's important, that you have people in your life that can offer you that type of feedback and that are willing to help you think through these things and process, and that you have someone that's accomplished more than you that's willing to help out. And so for John and I, it's looking at what are we trying to do? We have a rough idea, framework of the direction that we're trying to head. But when it comes to the actual strategic thinking and how to line things up, we've never done this before. So we're just kind of shooting at the hip. So to have someone that's willing to help us think through those next steps and to identify things that we hadn't considered before, it was an incredibly valuable trip. It was an incredibly valuable trip. And one of the things that John and I also kind of brought up and thought about and talked about was just how much we've been able to get done in the last 18 months and the importance of that. And so if you think about it and you actually run the numbers, if you're working 5 days a week and that's the normal, if you add in a sixth day, you're now working 6 days a week, you're accomplishing 20% more each week than the other person that's only working 5. And then if you add in a seventh day, you're accomplishing 40% more that week than the other person who's only working 5 days a week. And so John and I have been consistently working 6 and 7 days for the last 18 months or so. And that compounding has been something that I know I talk about often, but looking back at it, it's been so, so important. I mean, just the amount that we have learned, the connections we've made, and how far we've come as an organization as a consequence of that compounding. It would have taken a much longer time if we would have just done kind of the more traditional route. And that's something that I think is important for everyone to consider is if you want to do something if you have a lot of ambition, you want to do something that's meaningful, it's going to stand the test of time, it's something that you can look back on and be proud of, it's going to be incredibly difficult. And if it's going to be incredibly difficult, then it needs to be something that's worthwhile doing. And if that's going to be the case, then you're going to have to put in just an absurd amount of time and effort, and it's always going to be on your mind, and it's going to be something that just kind of consumes you from time to time. And you need to be willing to make that sacrifice if you want that outcome. And so actually putting numbers to it and thinking about how that's compounding and how much further ahead of the competition you're getting is something that is super important. And so for John and I, looking back on that and realizing oh, this is a consequence of the sacrifice and the effort that we've made up to this point. It was a really cool moment to kind of think about. And that prompted my next thought, which is that efficiency equation only works if you don't factor in diminished returns. Things like burnout and just being in a bad headspace and just the mundanity of it. I mean, those are real things that come into play when you're working that much. And so that equation only works where you're getting the extra 20%, 40% compounding if you're able to operate in a sustainable way over that time horizon. And so as I've been thinking about that, it's what formula can I build for my life that works for me, that does enable me to continue to work 6 and 7 days a week over a long time horizon, over the next 20, 40, 50, how many ever years that we're doing this. And for me, I think it's a holistic approach. And I think the reason that I like this conversation that I thought it was important to bring up is again, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably trying to accomplish something that's pretty cool and meaningful. And so it's worth looking at not just the business you're working on, but the other areas in your life and how you're integrating them into the business and how they may be affecting you. And so for me, this holistic lifestyle is one that I think is comprised of, first and foremost, am I getting enough sleep? Sleep is so important. Getting your REM sleep, regulating just your mentality, your mindset, processing things. A lot of that happens while you're sleeping. And even though you think that you can sleep 4 hours a night, 5 hours a night, you can pull that off every once in a while. But in the long run, if you're not getting your 7, 8, some people even need 9 hours, if you're not consistently hitting that, you're becoming less efficient, which is going to have those diminished returns that I talked about earlier. It's just going to affect your compounding. So you need to make sure you're protecting your sleep. But then you also need to look at not just the duration of the sleep, but also the quality of the sleep. Things like alcohol and caffeine have a negative impact on sleep, and they can offset your REM sleep, push it off further into the future. They can lower the amount of time you spend in REM, or you can miss REM entirely if you've overstimulated either of those two things I just mentioned. And so, like, a lot of factors go into sleep rather than just the duration of it. And so, as I talk about this holistic lifestyle, it's, am I getting enough sleep? What is the quality of my sleep? Am I limiting my caffeine and alcohol consumption? And then it's also, what am I doing during the day? Like, yes, I'm working a lot, but I see such a hack in actually working out, like working hard on your body, but also working on your business. I think both those things go hand in hand. I've talked about it often, but like the value that I see in working out is I show up as a much more confident person. It's a way to blow off steam, but it also helps me process. Like when I go on a long run, I mean, that's not technically working. I'm not in the restaurant. I don't have Excel pulled up on my computer. I'm not working through something. But like when I go, I'm not working through something physically, but when I go on a long run where I have a really solid workout or a really good sauna session, I'm thinking through these problems. And because I'm moving, my physiology has changed and the way I'm thinking is kind of changed. I'm able to process a little bit differently. And so I've started to view working out, sauna, running, etc., as a way of still working on the business. It's just changing the way I'm processing. And so it helps me to think a little bit clearer and it reduces my stress. I mean, that's a natural byproduct of working out, is reducing stress. And so we've talked about the duration of the sleep, the quality of the sleep, the benefit that I see in working out. And then I like sauna and ice bath. Again, it helps me process things. Ice bath specifically for myself is good for inflammation because I am working out a lot. So I want to make sure that my body physically feels good. But for the ice bath, it's just the idea of like, I never actually want to get into that ice bath. Like it sucks. It's cold and that's difficult. But by finding areas in your life where you're voluntarily choosing to do something that's difficult and that sucks, it makes it that much easier to do the same thing when something difficult comes up in your business or in your personal life. And you just get used to making that hard decision. And it does get a little bit easier over time to just, you are the person who does the hard thing. Like that becomes kind of this framework inside your head. I think it helps you to move through life just a little bit easier when you're used to doing the hard option. The benefit that I also get from ice bath is afterwards, mentally, I feel so good. I mean, I could be stressed out, I could be anxious, whatever it may be, but going into that ice bath, when you come out of it, you get such a shock. The mental clarity that I have afterwards is something that I'm yet to find it really in any other area of my life. And so as I think about this holistic approach to my life, it's the duration of the sleep, it's the quality of the sleep, it's the working out, changing your physiology as you process things, the ice bath to change your mood if you're in kind of a negative state. Like I'm trying to think of these things that I enjoy doing that make me feel good, but also have a net positive impact on my mentality and my efficiency. Because the reason that we are looking at this holistic lifestyle is because we don't want those diminished returns of, if I'm working 6-7 days a week, things are going to start to creep on me. Life's going to start to get a little bit harder just because I'm going to get worn down. So it's like, how do we offset that? How do we make this more sustainable? So I think all of those are elements of that. And then I guess the last two pieces that I would probably toss in there are, at the end of the day, or at some point in the day, I think it's really important to have some sort of positive interaction with a loved one, someone that you care about and that cares about you. And it's important that that person is aiming in an upward direction. Like you can have people in your life where you mutually care about each other, but if they're always a negative energy drain, then that's just going to affect you negatively too. Whether or not you think about it in the moment, that stuff does start to wear on you, and you can subconsciously take on those things that you're hearing. And it's not possible to avoid all negativity. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is, like, in general, you want to be around people that motivate you, excite you, and support you. So I think it's important to, like, every day, try and, whether it's a phone call, whether it's grabbing coffee, whether that's having someone you can come home to, I think it's important to surround yourself with the small, tight-knit group of people that support you, care about you, and are aiming in that upward direction. They may not want to do the exact same thing you're doing, whether that's a restaurant, a podcast, or an ultra marathon, or whatever it may be, but they have ambition. They're trying to build something themselves. And you can really feel that energy when you're talking to that person or those types of people. So I think it's important that you surround yourself with people like that as well. And then the last thing, as I kind of think about this holistic lifestyle, this one may be more unique to myself, but Like I think about the long run and the way that I've found that I can operate the best. It's all those things I've already mentioned. And then the last element for myself is an element of spontaneity. Changing up my environment, like going out to the ranch just for 24 hours, that was so good for me. It really was, just because I was able to get out of the restaurant and it was exciting. I got to do something new. We still worked extremely hard and thought through a lot of stuff and did some great planning that I'm excited about for what John and I are building here in the next 1, 5, 10 years, etc. But just that element of spontaneity of, I'm going to go do this thing that I don't normally do, and I'm going to gain that new experience. And it's maybe going to challenge or help my perspective grow. It's going to help me grow as a person. And it builds that life resume that we've kind of talked about before. That concept comes from Jesse Itzler, who's got just an incredible story, and hopefully will be a podcast guest here in the future. But really, like, as you think about this ambition of wanting to build something meaningful in your life, I don't really like the idea of like having all these siloed buckets where they're individual. I like the idea of trying to integrate all of these things into your life so that it flows in a cohesive manner in that direction while you're aiming upwards. And so when you're taking a business trip, if you can do that with good people that excites you, and you can find a way to go for a hike or go to a nice restaurant or go do something that's going to get you just a little bit of that spontaneity effect, something where you've got a new experience where it's not just the business, but it's your entire life that you can feel that you're making progress in. I think that's so important for myself, at least. I know my time in Florida was a good example of that. John and I spent 3 months in Florida before opening the restaurant, working in the restaurants down there, kind of getting ourselves more experience since we never worked in restaurants before. And moving to Florida was such a culture shock, and it was uncomfortable, but there's this spontaneity effect where I never thought I'd live on the East Coast or really live anywhere outside of the Midwest. And I look back on that, I'm so happy I did that. That was such a meaningful thing for myself to have lived outside of the Midwest for some period of my life. And I got to do it with John, which is great company. And we found time to go to the beach and make these memories. And I did some really cool podcasts with people that I would never have met if I hadn't gone to Florida. And so that element of spontaneity where you never quite know exactly what could be out there, but if you're just willing to go for it, like, that's so fun to me. And I just think all of those things together build up that holistic lifestyle. And so for myself, it's sleep. It's both the duration and the quality of the sleep. It's limiting those negative things that could impact that in other areas of your life. It's working out. It's ice bath and sauna. It's surrounding myself with people that are aiming in an upward direction, that we have a mutual support and care for each other. And it's that element of spontaneity, which is often travel and new experiences for myself. And so I know that's not going to be the same for every person, and that may even change for myself in the future. I may have forgot items or things, but I think it's important to consider that if you're going to try and do something meaningful in your life, that you need to make sure that you're doing all of these things in an integrated manner so that you're not going to wake up and regret not doing something, or you're not going to wake up and be completely burnt out to where you can't take another day forward because you're so tired and sick of the thing you've been doing. It's like, how do you keep those diminished returns from coming your way when you are trying to get that extra 20, 40% of compounding that we started off with at the beginning? So, it's never as easy as it sounds. It may be simple, but it's definitely not easy. But I think it's important to think about these things as you move forward with everything that you're building. I know it's important for myself to consider. That's just kind of where my mind's at. It's been a really good past 5 months since the restaurant's been open. Lots of ups and downs. I made an Instagram post a couple weeks ago kind of highlighting some of that. We just came off some pretty big milestones, and the momentum at the restaurant with our employees is incredible right now. I'm so proud of the team and how far they've come, and the buy-in that we're getting and the camaraderie that's building. This really is the ride of a lifetime, and it's super exciting. And I'm thankful for everyone that has supported myself and John this far along the way. And I'm excited for all of the new people that are coming into the journey through this and through the things that we're doing, that are reaching out. It's great to meet with you guys, and I love to continue to get to know you guys, and all of us that can come together and do something cool is my hope. I hope that a community continues to form around this podcast of people that are trying to do meaningful things in their life and that aren't afraid to do hard things. And I really do think that's the best way to live an exciting life. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for listening this week. Again, if you enjoyed the episode, please make sure to share it with a friend. You can find me on Instagram at Jacob O'Connor. The podcast is at Real Period Conversations. And have a good one, guys. Happy St. Patrick's Day.